My name is Madeleine Noland. I'm president of ATSC, the Broadcast Standards Association, and I have been in the television industry for about 23 years. And I've been president of ATSC since 2019. And before that, I worked with LG Electronics for 6 years, and Professor J.P. Kim was my boss. And I have great memories of working together with Professor Kim. And before that, I was working for a small startup company that had an invention which was for interactive television. So fast forward to today, now I am president of ATSC, and I'd like to share with you some information about ATSC 3.0, the latest and the world's most advanced television broadcast standard. The topics we'll cover today are an introduction to ATSC and to the system called ATSC 3.0. We'll cover some ATSC 3.0 technical details, and we'll talk about deployments, and then we'll talk about improvements in television, and we'll spend a lot of time on what is happening with 8K, in particular in South Korea. ATSC 3.0 is a terrestrial distribution network. It uses the traditional television broadcast infrastructure, and it is a new standard that is currently the best standard in the world for broadcast television, and it enables new immersive media for television audiences around the world. ATSC is a standards development organization. We are developing voluntary standards and recommended practices to advance terrestrial digital broadcasting. We have about 140 members, and they come from across the ecosystem of television broadcasting and across the world. Our mission is to empower the broadcasting ecosystem through innovation and collaboration, and to enable a more connected world that unlocks the full potential of broadcasting. ATSC 3.0 is the most recent major project developed by the members of ATSC. It has more bits possible, it's more robust and more evolvable, so the physical layer is better. It's the first broadcast television system which is based on IP. It's very secure. Of course, the number one thing is better television. It allows 4K HDR, high frame rate video, immersive personalized audio, improved accessibility, and interactivity. It also manages advanced emergency alerting for public services, including rich media, customizable, multilingual, precise geo-targeting, and first responder messaging. And one of the most important parts of ATSC 3.0 is that it enables new business models for broadcasters. And these business models can include new types of advertising opportunities, pay-per-view or subscription services, service usage reporting, and datacasting. For this seminar, we'll spend most of our time on the television advancements because this is the immersive media work. But what's happening in datacasting is also very interesting. And in particular, in South Korea, some of the use cases that are being developed, for example, enhanced GPS services, are very interesting, and they're gaining early success in the business place. I want to talk a little bit about some of the technical aspects of ATSC 3.0. When it comes to delivering data over the air, over a wireless network, the Shannon limit is a theoretical limit on the amount of data you can send versus how strong the signal is. In this case, ATSC 3.0 is very close to the Shannon limit. The early versions of ATSC are represented by this one black star here called ATSC 1.0 or A53. On the x-axis, you see the signal-to-noise ratio. This is a measurement of how strong and robust the signal is. And on the y-axis, you see the BICM efficiency, which is essentially how much data can be carried in a signal. What you can see from the ATSC 1.0 placement is that with a signal strength of roughly 15 decibels, signal-to-noise ratio, you can carry roughly 19 megabits per second of data. The ATSC 3.0 system is indicated by the red dots, and you can see that even at the 15 decibel signal-to-noise ratio, ATSC 3.0 is about 30% more efficient than ATSC 1.0. But the other important part of this is that you can see also that ATSC 1.0 was a single point of operation. It was 15 decibels signal-to-noise ratio, roughly, and 19 megabits per second. With ATSC 3.0, you can see all these different red dots, which indicate that broadcasters can now choose whether they want to carry a very robust signal with not very much data down here in the lower part of the graph, or a less robust signal with high data throughput. So for example, a broadcaster might have a mobile service, which is down here in the lower left part of the graph, because you don't need as much data to reach a mobile phone screen. You don't need 8K or even 4K. SD on a mobile screen is okay, or full HD. But if you have a rooftop antenna on the top of an apartment building, for example, you could have a much less robust signal and be able to send 4K pictures. This is another part of the ATSC physical layer called layer division multiplexing. Layer division multiplexing is one of the most important new aspects of television systems. You have already something called frequency division multiplexing. And what that means is that you can have one service in one time slice and another service in another time slice, in a frequency slice. You also have time division multiplexing, which allows you to have different services in different time slices. But layer division multiplexing is brand new, and that has to do with amplitude. So in other words, you can have one service in a less strong signal and another service in a very strong signal. And the receivers are able to differentiate between the two signals in order to carry two services using layer division multiplexing. So a physical layer frame in ATSC 3.0 consists of a bootstrap, a preamble, and one or more subframes that carry the data. The bootstrap is the most fundamental entry point. It's the basic signal infrastructure for physical transmission. The reason why the bootstrap is important and special is because in many television systems, the television receivers are specially made understanding what the system is and what the system does. In ATSC, the bootstrap is there to tell the receiver all about the signal that's coming in, which means that the receiver doesn't need to be purpose-built. The receiver can look at the bootstrap and do different things at different times. I mentioned a minute ago about the IP backbone. ATSC 3.0 is the world's first television system that was built specifically over IP. And the purpose for that is to enable hybrid television services. In other words, television services that are a combination of information that's been sent over the air and information that's been sent via broadband. It was very important for the protocol stack to be able to line up using an IP backbone across both delivery methods. So the IP transport enables OTA, OTT, hybrid services, datacasting, and convergence scenarios between ATSC 3.0 and other IP-based networks. I'm going to come back to this because there are many scenarios where the hybrid broadcast broadband aspect of ATSC3 is very important. The system is secure. It's designed to ensure that the studio to transmitter link is secure. The signaling tables can be signed so that the receiver always knows that the broadcast came from a bona fide broadcaster. The content can be protected with web-based CENC encryption methodology, and it also requires the secure broadband for the hybrid services. Of course, top of the list is better TV. We have ultra high definition 4K 2860p 120 frames per second using HEVC, and the standard also provides for 8K at 4320p with 60 frames per second using the VVC video codec. It has many flavors of high dynamic range from PQ, HLG, HDR10, HDR10 Plus, Dolby Vision, Advanced HDR by Technicolor, and of course, BT 2020 wide color gamut across all of those. The audio is also significantly better. It's 3D object-based audio with multiple languages, voice boost, and it works on headphones, sound bars, as well as complicated home theater systems. One of the most important things about the audio system is that for the first time, it enables broadcasters to deliver audio in almost unlimited languages. In the previous system, you could only deliver 2 languages. And now you can deliver as many as you want. The main reason why it allows you to do that is because the dialogue is in a separate channel or a separate, sort of a separate object than the music and effects, which means that when you want to have a different language of dialogue, you can keep the same music and effects and you swap out the dialogue. And the good thing about that is that it's the audience that can choose which language they want to listen to. And speaking of language, it has improved accessibility functions. So multilingual captions, voice boost, multilingual audio and video descriptive services, and picture-in-picture sign language. One of the areas where the Japanese NHK STRL is working very hard, as well as what's going on in Korea, particularly in KBS, is the study of avatar sign language, which allows more broadcasters to have sign language for more content. And the television system of ATSC3 allows you to have that picture-in-picture on the screen, or you can squeeze the video and put the sign language avatar to the side. There's many, many ways to do it. It also offers rich emergency messaging. The idea here is that you can target the emergency message only to those affected areas. It's personalizable, again, many languages, interactive, and with images and video and multilingual audio in order to preserve life and property. And finally, there are interactive features. It was interesting to me that the first ATSC 3.0 deployment was in South Korea in 2017. And the service started immediately with interactivity called TBVA. And here on the picture, you can see a small icon in the lower left of the image, which shows interactivity that is on the air in the United States on the NBC network. And this is available now. This is actually a screenshot that I took on my own television set at my own house, getting the NBC signal from a next-gen television station. One of the most important aspects of the interactive system is, well, what is the killer app? What do people really want to do? And we can get some information about that from Europe. Europe has been using interactive television for many years, much longer than South Korea, longer than the United States, and longer than Brazil. What they found was that what people really want is start over TV. When you start watching a television program and you want to start it again from the beginning. That's one of the most important ones. So that's already here in ATSC 3.0. And you probably can't read the little text at the bottom of this little icon, but it says to restart the program, you press OK. Also, there's lots of opportunities. There's on-demand content, there's click to buy, click to explore, sports stats, social media, integration, and gaming. Pretty much anything that you can do with a web page, you can do on TV. We're going to talk a little bit more about 8K later in the seminar. Here's a little bit more detail about the emergency messaging. This is just an example of the signaling table. And while that's not the most important part, the most important part is the rich emergency messaging can go to the general public, which you might be familiar with, and it can also be targeted only to private audiences. For example, if you needed to get messages to police departments or fire departments, you can send messages just to those receivers and not to the general public. It also, of course, has lots of information about the message itself, when the emergency is taking place, what is the summary of the emergency, where is it found, and what are some of the details about it. And you're also able to interact with the information where the viewer can click on links and get more information, or the viewer can dismiss the alert because it doesn't pertain to them, for example. I talked a little bit about new opportunities and use cases. Data casting is one of the most important opportunities, and that's because it's an opportunity for broadcasters to make money on their television spectrum. And it's not linear television services. It can be anything else. And that, again, is one of the most important things about the IP backbone of ATSC 3.0. ATSC 3.0 allows broadcasters to deliver any kind of data wirelessly over the air to an unlimited number of devices in the coverage area. This one-to-many service of any kind of data is extremely important. And anytime you need to get a large amount of data to a large number of devices, the broadcast network is a great way to go. For example, if you have a game console that's very popular and it needs a software update, you can send the same software update to all the consoles in the metropolitan area of Seoul with one broadcast. So that's a very powerful data delivery network, and broadcasters see an opportunity to use the network that way. There's also enhancements to the precision navigation system in the US called GPS. In India, it's called NAVIC, but it's basically the GNSS satellite system that provides precision time and precision location. There are two services that are being used in ATSC 3.0 now. One is called BPS, and this is the ability to carry precision time information in the event that something happens to the satellite system. So, for example, along the border between North and South Korea and along the border between Russia and Ukraine, where hostilities take place, it's not uncommon for the GPS system to be jammed or spoofed by the opponent. And when that happens, suddenly you don't have your location information and you don't have your time information. The BPS system allows there to be a second backup system to this satellite system, which is quite vulnerable to attack. The other one is called eGPS, and this is enhanced GPS. And this type of system is used when GPS is up and running. It's not meant to be a backup. It's meant to be an enhancement. And what it does is it increases the precision of the location accuracy of GPS. And this is particularly interesting because MBC in South Korea has started launching a business of eGPS. And they are making revenue, and the revenue is growing year over year for this kind of service. It's valuable for using drones. It's valuable for precision agriculture, smart cities, and other use cases. The new TV service, as I mentioned, of course, is very interesting, and the business is interesting that goes along with that. The advanced advertising, geo-targeted or personalized advertising solutions You have new advertising inventory on interactive overlays or pre or mid or post rolls with on-demand viewing. It's also possible to do paid or freemium services. You can protect the content and enable enhanced and premium services behind a registration or a paywall. And the smart city infrastructure is another use case that broadcasters are working on. The emergency messages to public signage, smart buildings, smart agriculture use cases, digital signage updates, and also distance education to rural communities. NBC launched the eGPS successful service. I believe they started in 2023, and they've sold thousands of receivers, and they have hundreds of transmitter sites up and running in South Korea. As I mentioned, South Korea was the first country to launch ATSC 3.0. They launched it in 2017, and last I heard, about 80% of the country has access to an ATSC 3.0 service. South Korea launched in 2017 with a plan of turning off the old service in 2027. Not only, though, did South Korea announce that they wanted to turn off the old service, but they also wanted to turn off all HD broadcasting. In South Korea, it's going to be all UHD broadcasting for the whole country. I don't know if the 2027 target date is going to be postponed or is going to be kept, but in any case, it's an ambitious date, and I'm very happy that South Korea has taken the lead on this. In many cases, these kinds of changes are driven by big sports, and South Korea, of course, hosted the Winter Olympics in 2018 in Pyeongchang, and so they were on the air in 2017 in order to be sure to have UHD broadcasts by 2018. The United States was the second to launch the system. They launched in 2020, and currently about 80% of the United States has access to at least one ATSC 3.0 service. The United States is moving forward with this service deployment, and recently the FCC in the United States started a new rulemaking to help accelerate the transition. Jamaica was the third country. They launched in 2022. They have transmitters up on all of the parishes in the island, although they have yet to start deploying the receivers. Trinidad and Tobago was number 4. They have a pilot station up in their capital city of Port-au-Prince, which you can sort of see here, but that signal reaches much more of the island than was depicted here. And they expect to launch very quickly. It's a small country with not too many transmitters, and so it will be a relatively quick turnaround for them to finish launching ATSC 3.0. One of the most important latest developments is Brazil. Brazil is launching ATSC 3.0, and they started this year. They're calling their system DTV+. In Korea, it's called UHD Broadcast. In America, in the United States, it's called Next Gen TV. And in Brazil, it's called DTV+. Basically, the entire system is based on ATSC 3.0, except for the interactive system. They are an enormous over-the-air broadcast market. They have approximately 17,000 television stations. By contrast, the United States has about 1,700 television stations, 1,700. About 75% of households are using over-the-air television as their primary source of television entertainment. And over 75% of their times watching television, they watch over-the-air broadcast. So it's a very, very popular platform in Brazil. They are exercising more features of the ATSC 3.0 standard than any other country. They are pushing the envelope of what broadcast can do. They also have stations on the air now. They started in Rio in April, Rio de Janeiro. São Paulo has 2 pilot stations on, and that's in, they launched in August. And the capital city, Brasilia, will be launched in December of this year. And just like South Korea, they have a goal of having the commercial launch by 2026, because one of the most important things in Brazil is football, not American football, soccer football. So when the FIFA World Cup comes in 2026, that is going to be what everyone is going to be watching. And so for Brazil to get commercial services on the air in time for the World Cup is #1 priority. India. India is doing a proof of concept with ATSC 3.0. Their primary use case is mobile. They do not really care that much about television sets. They care about phones. And the reason is that most people in India watch video on their phone. There's approximately 1.2 billion cell phones in India. Now, there are also 200 million television sets, but 200 million is not a big number in India. They have announced that they will do a 19-city pilot for direct-to-mobile services. And they announced that in 2024, but they have not actually started doing it. ATSC 3.0 was adopted by TSDSI, which is India's telecom standards development organization. And they did that in 2022. And the other thing to mention is that feature phones are important. And a feature phone is a funny name for a phone that is the simple kind of phone. In many cases in India, they still are on the 2G cellular network system, which is not capable of delivering video, which is why delivering video over the broadcast system to a feature phone is a very important use case in India. I should be clear that India has not made a decision that they're going to use ATSC 3.0 for their system. They're looking at ATSC 3.0 and 5G broadcast as the top 2 systems in consideration. And I'm not sure when they're going to make a decision about which system to use. Things in India travel, or I should say, progress at their own pace. Canada. Canada has experimental licenses with ATSC 3.0 on the air right now. The most important project is in Calgary, where they're experimenting with smart city use cases using transmitting digital signage updates and distance education material. They're looking to build out that proof of concept in Calgary, and the project is so interesting that many other cities in Canada are very interested in launching a similar project. So coming back to television, what are we deploying in terms of the services that are possible? Certainly UHD video is one of the most important services that's being deployed, and that's in South Korea primarily right now. They have 4K UHD video services since February of 2018 in time for the Winter Olympics. High dynamic range and wide color gamut is in high use in the United States. Not so much in South Korea, where broadcasts started before HDR really became a solid technology. And so many of the broadcasts that were launched in South Korea were standard dynamic range. I know that's changing. In the United States, though, we launched later, and high dynamic range was very much easier to do. So the US broadcasts are using HDR. About 80 million households receive HDR services using a blend of the different kinds of HDR systems available. Next-gen audio is also very important, and South Korean broadcasters are using MPEG-H audio to deliver the enhanced audio sound, and US broadcasters are using Dolby AC4. And about 32 million households in the United States are receiving the really great audio using Dolby Atmos services. And Brazil plans to follow in South Korea's footsteps and use MPEG-H audio. And finally, interactivity. As I mentioned, the South Korean broadcasters launched TVVA, interactive services, in 2018. It allowed people who are watching the Olympics to look at different sports, things that had taken place already. It was a very interactive system that allowed you to watch what you want and when you want. And US broadcasters are reaching about 70 million households with interactive access to local on-demand content, and about 38 million households can do the start over TV, which is one of the most popular use cases. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the most advanced use of ATSC 3.0. And I want to be clear that since this is a seminar on immersive media, this is something that is in development. There aren't any commercial broadcasts of 8K right now, but what's very interesting to me is all the development that's taking place to enable 8K to work. This is the most important slide in the entire slide deck. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide. Why is 8K over broadcast interesting? I think about South Korea, and not very many people watch over-the-air broadcast these days. And I think it's about 5% of people use over-the-air broadcast in South Korea because streaming services are very, very good. Most households have broadband. In the United States, about 25% of people watch over-the-air broadcast. And as I mentioned, in Brazil, the number is much higher, closer to 70 or 75%. So why would we care about 8K over broadcast when not very many people are watching it? Well, what I want to talk about is the efficiency of one-to-many services. So you imagine you've got a unicast network, like a 5G network or an internet, and every user gets their own service, even if they're all watching the same thing at the same time. Multicast service is one-to-many, but it goes to specific receivers, not just everybody. And broadcast just gets everybody. Doesn't matter. As long as you're in range of the signal, you get it. So thinking about what is the bit rate of various aspects of content? So if you're just going to send a text message, it's about 18 bytes. And nobody cares about multicast or broadcast because it's always one-to-one. And then you have a cell phone call with enhanced voice services. And that gets a little bit more, around 128 kilobits per second. And again, nobody cares about multicast or broadcast because phone calls are always one-to-one. Emails with PowerPoint, same thing, about maybe 20 megabytes per second. Then you get into popular television shows where you have maybe 7 or 8 million viewers. And let's just say you're delivering it at 3 megabits per second. So if you're sending it over unicast, in other words, this popular television show, everybody gets their own stream, it's going to take about 23,400,000 megabits per second. If you send it over multicast or broadcast, you're still only using 3 megabits per second. I want to talk about this hybrid for a second. What hybrid means is that if you tune to this broadcast of this popular television show, but you want to use the start over function or something like that, you consider that you've got this hybrid area where some people are watching it unicast and most people are watching it broadcast. In which case you can guess that it's still going to take you about 1,170 megabits per second to service the hybrid use case. Now you can look at a really, really popular television show, like the NFL, National Football League in the United States, or World Cup in Brazil, or the Olympics in most parts of the world. So let's say that you have 40 million viewers. Again, the service is 3 megabits per second. It's going to take you about 120 million megabits per second if you're going to serve everybody on a unicast network. Again, if you're doing multicast or you're doing broadcast, you're still at 3. And if you're going to do unicast, we have to assume that some number of people are going to be time shifting viewing. So here's India Championship Cricket, 200 million viewers. So 600 terabytes of data if everybody wants to watch the service on unicast. And the funny thing is that they do watch these matches on their cell phone. And the user experience is not very good. When we think about 8K, this number, 3 megabits per second, is not enough. 8K is going to require a much, much higher bit rate. So you take all of these numbers and you multiply them. So if you're going to watch a popular show live using 8K resolution, all of these numbers are going to go very high. And you look at the opportunity for broadcast and multicast, and the bitrate savings are immense. That's why people care about 8K over broadcast. You really can't do it if you're going to have too many viewers at the same time on the unicast network. You've got to have a broadcast or a multicast network. So again, coming back to this Shannon limit idea, this is the same slide I showed earlier. And it talks about how you can have a low capacity, highly robust signal versus a high capacity, less robust signal. In the case of 8K, we are going to be up here in the upper right part of this diagram. Less robust signals, but very high data rate. And we're also going to be talking about layer division multiplexing again. Again, this is a slide I showed earlier, but the trials and use cases for delivering 8K services to the home over the air are going to use this layer division multiplex, where you have an enhanced layer for fixed services and a core layer for mobile services. But we're not necessarily going to use these layers for those two things, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So again, coming back to what we're doing with ATSC 3.0 in South Korea, what is the status of ATSC 3.0 in South Korea? I'm going to give you a little bit more detail about that. First, there is enhanced TV. So there's mobility, phones, laptops, high quality, and geographic, demographic ad insertion. Also, data casting, as I mentioned, is being experimented and used in South Korea. The navigation updates, the apps and the data, and the multimedia files can all be delivered over broadcast in South Korea. And finally, South Korea is definitely focused on convergence between the smart TV, the Wi-Fi, the 4G, 5G, tablets and smartphones, personal computers, and the over-the-air system. And of course, there's what you might call internet TV or interactive TV on the CTVs. So I want to talk a little bit about ATSC 3.0 based terrestrial 8K UHD distribution. And I'm going to start with something called channel bonding. So channel bonding is a mechanism whereby you're using two broadcast channels at the same time together to deliver the 8K service. So this was a demonstration done at the 2019 NAB show in the United States. You had a channel bonding transmitter and a receiver fully compliant with the ATSC 3 standard that were implemented for terrestrial 8K UHD delivery. HEVC encoding was used at that time because VVC wasn't done yet, and the contents were successfully delivered in the laboratory. Now, remember in the previous slide, I was talking about data rates of 3 megabits per second. Now we're talking about data rates of 110 megabits per second, which is going to be needed for 8K using HEVC. It can probably go lower than that when you're using VVC, but it's still a very big number. And the field trial also took place with KBS in 2022. So what you can see in these diagrams is the block diagram of how the two channels were used together in order to deliver the full range of content that was needed for 8K. And you had the antenna for one channel, you had the transmitter antenna and the receive antenna in the laboratory and producing the 8K content. Another way to do this is what's called MIMO, and that's another way to do 8K UHD distribution. Interestingly, MIMO, the first country to use MIMO commercially will be Brazil. They have determined that their standard is going to be launched from the beginning using MIMO. So what is MIMO? MIMO is when your transmit antenna has polarization. So you have a vertical polarization and a horizontal polarization. And using these two polarizations, you can practically double the capacity of your signal. Of course, you need a MIMO receive antenna also, and you need a receiver that can understand how to interpret MIMO. But that's why these things are prototypes at the time this was done, but Brazil is commercializing it right now. So ATSC 3 supports this multiple input, multiple output technology, and it supports what you call cross-polarized 2x2 MIMO, It increases the system throughput by double. So you can get over 100 megabits per second in a single RF channel using MIMO. You need a MIMO precoder, stream combining, IQ polarization, interleaving, phase hopping. It's all optionally added to provide additional robustness. Again, South Korea is at the cutting edge of this work. The MIMO laboratory demonstration at ETRI included a MIMO transmitter and receiver fully compliant with ATSC 3, which were implemented for terrestrial 8K UHD delivery. Again, we're using HEVC, and the encoded 8K HD contents were successfully delivered in the laboratory, and it was over 100 megabits per second. So you can see what the MIMO antenna looks like on the receive side and on the transmit side, and there's the 8K picture coming in the laboratory. And they did this in the field as well, again with KBS at the transmitter facility. So at the building in the tower, we have the equipment, and here on the transmit tower, you have the cross-polarized vertical and horizontal antenna up there on the top of the tower. And for the receive antenna, they went out in a van, and they had the receive antenna up on the van, and they were able not only to receive the 8K content, but they were able to receive the 8K content while they were driving. All this was taking place with KBS equipment, with ETRI equipment on KBS transmitters. The transmitter was located near the North Korean border, and these diagrams show the pictures of what the signal looked like as it was coming in from the MIMO transmitter. 113 megabits per second were achieved at 6 megahertz band through OTA, over the air. The third way that's possible to deliver 8K UHD over the air is converged 8K distribution using the OTA and OTT systems. And this gets again into the hybrid capabilities of ATSC 3.0, which is largely because of its IP-based transport protocol. So in this case, ATSC 3, as I mentioned, easily supports over-the-air, over-the-top convergence due to the all-IP feature. And it also supports layered video coding, also called scalable HEVC or SHVC, with two layers. You have the base layer, which contains the 4K UHD content, and the enhancement layer that includes metadata to enhance the 4K base layer into 8K UHD video. You distribute via broadcasting and broadband. So the OTA-only user can at least watch 4K. If you have OTA and OTT links, both available, the user can get 8K for the same content. So you send the base layer over the air, it's received at the transmitter, you send the enhancement layer over the broadband on unicast, and the television set can combine the two together to produce an 8K image. A preliminary laboratory demonstration at ETRI in South Korea, SHVC-based OTA-OTT convergence system, fully compliant with the ATSC 3 standards, was implemented for terrestrial 8K delivery. The base layer, containing 4K UHD content at 20 megabits per second, and the enhancement layer with metadata, which was 40 megabits per second, were successfully delivered and combined for 8K UHD. In this case, it was 30 frames per second. But in 2021, they moved it to 60 frames per second. Before I move to the summary, I would like to note that you notice that these trials took place between mainly 2019 through 2022. So what happened after that? Most of the equipment was delivered to Brazil, where they're working with deciding which system they wanted to use, and they ultimately chose ATSC 3.0, and that was a lot to do with what the experimental work was done at ETRI and Clever Logic and KBS in South Korea. So they couldn't continue the work in South Korea because they had to send all the gear to Brazil. And a lot of that gear is still in Brazil, where they're still working and experimenting with MIMO and other advanced features for the Brazilian system. A little bit about the pros and cons of these three methods of delivering 8K UHD over the air. For channel bonding, it's good that you only need a single antenna. You can get over 110 megabits per second. The downside is that you have to use 2 RF channels instead of just one. It's also not backward compatible with existing television sets. MIMO allows you to use 1 RF channel, which is great. You still get more than 110 megabits per second, but you need the vertical and the horizontal antennas required both on the transmit side and the receiver side. And again, it's not backward compatible with existing television sets. And then the third method, which was the OTA-OTT hybrid system, it is backward compatible using a single radio frequency channel and an antenna. And any ATSC 3.0 SHVC ready TVs can use it, and it can be free of charge to do the 4K UHD, and you could potentially charge money for the 8K. And then the cons listed are an OTT payment required for 8K, but actually that's a business decision, not a technical decision. So again, as I mentioned, after the work was completed, the equipment was moved to Brazil for laboratory trials in 2023 and field trials in 2024. The ETRI equipment supports 8K, multiple 4K UHD streams, and dozens of full HD streams. You can actually look at the YouTube videos of these trials if you want to see the system in action. And lastly, there are some resources for some more information about ATSC and about ATSC 3.0. You can find the current state of deployments on the website. There is also a free monthly newsletter that allows you to stay up to date on everything that's happening. There is in the monthly newsletter an easy reference column that identifies any changes in the standard. And there's also going to be a conference in Washington in June called the Next Gen Broadcast Conference. I hope to be at the Korean conference, KOBA, next May, and maybe you guys can join us in the United States for the Next Gen Broadcast Conference in June. And with that, I'll conclude my remarks, and I will turn it over to Professor Kim. If there are any questions in the chat or any questions that people would like to raise, Professor Kim, I would ask you to please help translate them because my Korean is no good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so the very interesting seminar. I saw the some question from the online chatting message.
I see one question. Which of the 3 8K delivery methods do you think is most practical for commercialization? I think that in Brazil, the MIMO is the most practical method for commercialization because they are launching MIMO from the very beginning. I think that in other countries, the OTA-OTT hybrid method is the most practical for commercialization because it uses existing infrastructure. People don't need new antennas, they don't need new TVs, and they don't need new transmitters. So I think that that would be the most practical. Channel bonding is probably the least practical, partly because it's not very efficient for the broadcaster. They have to use 2 channels instead of 1, and the television sets would have to be upgraded or changed. So to me, the first one, channel bonding, is the least interesting. The MIMO one is the most interesting for countries using MIMO, and the hybrid one is the most interesting for every other country.
Okay. It's enough. Okay, thank you. As you know, we are talking about the next generation, next studying in ATSC 3.0 with you. So here is the Department of Immersive Media Engineering and Artificial Intelligence Convergence in the class. So they have an interesting about the future future work about the AI and immersive media from the ATSC or Brazil or India. So could you explain more? Could you explain more information about that?
Yes. So the advancements coming with AI and other immersive media advancements in ATSC. ATSC has a major project launched for AI, and one of the aspects of this project is to help implementers understand the standard. So it's not really intended for the media itself, but for implementers who are launching the standard for the first time. But the area where AI, I think, is most important is in the content creation side right now. And when you think about content creation, the AI can get content created faster and cheaper, and I suppose in some cases better. That's one area which I think is very important. When you think about, for example, local advertising, right now it costs a lot of money to create a television commercial. And so local small businesses can't really advertise on television because they can't afford to make a commercial. With AI, you can make a commercial for maybe 1,000 US dollars, which is very affordable for a small business. That's one of the most important things. When it comes to standards, the area of AI that I think is very interesting is whether the content has been changed by AI, and if so, where in the content creation chain was it changed, and in what way? So the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers is working on a metadata system that will allow a piece of content to include metadata that identifies which AI agents were used in its creation. The purpose of that metadata is to ensure that the content can be traced back to exactly how it was created, and it could potentially be recreated using that information. Another really important aspect of AI in broadcast television is content discovery. Right now, viewers have so many choices. And with AI, there's going to be even more choices of content because it's going to be so easy to create great content. So the content discovery is going to be extremely important. And having AI be able to understand the viewer's likes and dislikes and be able to have a very powerful and smart recommendation engine is going to be even more important than it ever has been. Already, content discovery is difficult despite the great tools that are out there for personal recommendations. But I think AI is going to be important in getting that content discovery aspect even better than before. And then I think that another aspect of this could be AI to optimize the content delivery network. As you saw in the slide that showed the Shannon limit, there's all these different operation points that you can be for ATSC 3.0 television and data delivery. Which is the most optimal one for any given service? The other thing that is important is that broadcasters don't have to choose only one of those operating points. They can be operating at multiple points along that line at the same time. So they could, for example, have a mobile service going and a UHD service or even an 8K service all going at the same time in the same channel. What is the best way to optimize how you spend your channel allocation across those services? And that optimization might change over frame by frame of video. So to be able to use AI to optimize your channel efficiency is another major area of study. There are many, many areas of study for AI. I think that another one is going to be enhancing content that already exists. So if you imagine you have a large archive catalog of content that people love and are familiar with, and you want this content to now be available in 8K HDR, we can use AI to enhance that content up to current standards in a much more efficient and hopefully high quality way. Another area that I think AI is going to be extremely important is for accessibility. Already AI is getting pretty good at creating closed captions, even live. It's getting pretty good at translating from one language to another. And sign language avatars are getting better and better. To me, that is one of the most important use cases for AI, is to be able to provide the content to a wide variety of types of users, a wide variety of people who have different abilities, and all of those people can enjoy the content and can get the news, get the emergency message in the language and in the manner that they're able to understand it. These are all very, very important use cases of AI, in my personal opinion. One more use case I want to mention, which I think is very interesting, and I've seen demonstrations of this, is where you take a piece of content that is intended for a television set. So it's a 16:9 aspect ratio, and you want to create a version of it for a cell phone. I've seen demonstrations where AI is using a smart mechanism of making the cell phone image. So if you imagine that you've got, for example, a K-pop band, and there's 4 or 5 band members, and on the 16:9 aspect ratio, you can see all the members of the band, and they're dancing and they're singing, and you can see what's happening. But on the phone, it's going to be this narrow image, and the AI is smart enough to know which member of the band is the most important to focus on at any given point. And so it's automatically creating the cell phone aspect ratio from the 16:9 aspect ratio. Makes it much faster and easier to take a piece of content and get it ready for multiple different types of video screens and use cases.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your explanation about a lot of use case from using AI. Thank you. Is there any other question? Okay, Madeleine, do you remember we have a lot of trial to the mobility service from the car, such as GM and Ford, something like that. So, is there any new news from the car company?
Yeah, that's a very good question. In fact, again, South Korea is taking the lead. Unfortunately, most of the car companies are very private about their development. They don't like to share the information. They don't like to share their plans. So I don't have a lot of firsthand information, but my understanding is that Hyundai Mobis is very interested in ATSC 3.0 for delivering contents to the cars. Again, when you think about what are some of the use cases of AI, in some ways, if AI can help with autonomous driving, it's going to make broadcast even more important, because now you can reach all these cars with the high quality content for backseat viewing and maybe even front seat viewing. I think the other thing that's interesting about cars is that if you go back to the MBC trial with eGPS, it's able to take the accuracy of the GPS signal from plus or minus 3 meters all the way down to plus or minus 10 centimeters. And for an autonomous driving car, that's an important difference. And so being able to use ATSC 3.0 in order to improve autonomous cars in terms of the accuracy of their position and make it more fun for the people in the car since they don't have to drive anymore, they can be entertained. So I think the car is going to be more and more like the new living room. I've seen some terrific demonstrations at the trade shows of opportunities to use ATSC 3.0 broadcasting in a car for the data side as well as for the entertainment side.
Thank you. Thank you for the good seminar. Keep in touch with you. So I would like to see you again next year, Cuba. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kim. And I look forward to seeing you again soon also. And thank you to your students who participated in the seminar. I really appreciate the opportunity.